Okay, I'm going to call our regular board meeting on today's date, July 21st, 2022 to order at 7 p.m. Can we pledge allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anyone for public forum?
We should have a Mr. Scott Luga here this evening.
All right, Mr. Vuga, you should be able to be heard now.
All right, so I can't see myself, but you guys can hear me.
We can hear you. Thank you for joining us.
Perfect. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Okay, so my wife previously sent in some concerns to the board, so you guys are probably aware of what I'm going to talk about, but just kind of as a synopsis, I am one of what appears to be roughly 70 families that applied for aftercare through the MRH ECC, so that we could have our children watched past essentially past 3 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or either more or less days than that. So I think about 100 families applied, and it sounds like only about 35 or so got in. So obviously that's really difficult for those of us that work. I am a teacher in the Kirkwood School District, and I'm at the high school. I get out at 2:45, and that's pretty early for most people. And I still couldn't get to the ECC to pick up my son in time. So I think there's definitely some concern, some concern there from not just myself, but some of my neighbors I've been talking to about what can be done to hopefully bridge that gap and extend the availability of aftercare to more families, even if mine's not included. Some concerns that I kind of had with maybe why the positions aren't being filled. One might be pay. I think MRH has listed the pay at $12 an hour, which I was driving through Rock Hill today, and you can make $14 an hour at Wendy's. Wash U pays student workers $15 an hour. Rockwood pays hourly workers $16, Clayton $17, Kirkwood $15. Brentwood pays support staff between $15 and $20. So I mean, I just don't think that the pay is necessarily commensurate with what you're asking people to do. The hours at MRH ECC, and I know that asking teachers to stay longer, obviously as a teacher, there's a contract negotiation that goes on with that. I understand those things, but the hours at MRH ECC ending at 3 p.m. Kirkwood ends at 5:30, Brentwood ends at 3:35, Webster's at 3:30. So you're still looking at one of the earlier release times at MRH ECC. So it presents some pretty serious challenges to those of us in the community that want to utilize the school system here, but are obviously met with quite a few roadblocks. So I mean, what we're left having to do is either I've already had to contact Kirkwood to see if I can get back in and leave MRH, despite the fact that, you know, all of my neighbors here on the south side of Maplewood, most of us want to attend Maplewood, but if the hours don't work, obviously we can't do that. I'm fortunate that I do have some other options. So we're really just left scrambling, and we're hoping that something can be done sooner rather than later. Some of my suggestions, and I know some of these things have been done, but perhaps they need to be done with a bit more urgency. Contacting more area school districts to see if high school workers do want to come do this job beyond just Maplewood and Brentwood, maybe communities that have been contacted. Perhaps contacting College of Educations at UMSL, Webster, WashU, Fompon. I know that people that are studying to become teachers, this is pretty valued experience for them to be able to come in and get paid to do this job. I think raising the wages is something that has to be considered to get these positions filled, so we can extend this to more families. And then perhaps talking about having MRH ECC run longer hours to 3:30, 3:45, just something that gives us a little more breathing room. So again, like I know that some of those things are things you guys have tried to do. I don't know when they were last tried. If you guys have like pumped up the volume on those if there's been any urgency, but now that the reality is, we're a month away from starting school, and I can just tell you from our standpoint in my household, anecdotally, that like we're scrambling to figure out like how is this going to work. We've got care.com accounts trying to find people to come to our house, pick up our kid, bring them to our house, just so I can get home by like 3:45. And I'm sure that my situation is much more fortunate than others, because I do get off work so early and my wife does work from home. But I just really want, I wanted to get on record, both through an email and here at the board meeting, letting you guys know that there's a portion of the community that is not being served probably as well as we had hoped that we would be, and that we're really scrambling to figure out what to do in a month's time.
Thank you, Mr. Vuga. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. And I do believe that there will be a portion of our meeting where we discuss that and address hopefully some of those concerns. Input of the community is so valuable, and we appreciate everyone that comes forward for public forum. Is Mr. Vuga the only individual that has signed up for public forum today?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We ready, Chris? Okay. Okay, can I get an approval of the consent agenda, please?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Rachel.
Second.
Thank you, Amber. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Consent agenda approved. Can I get study items 3.01, I believe is next. Is that correct?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Have some change orders related to the construction project going on at the middle school and high school. I've noted the details there and write-up. These are quite substantive. We've got access controls, moving the fridge and freezer condensing units to different places. Unexpected items here, classroom revisions, some classroom revisions up on the 4th floor for the high school math department. Let's see here. We've got overtime for our flooring company to complete work. We've got additional demolition. We've got structural steel installation. Some, guess what, additional foundations we found after we started digging down there. Every time we have a change orders because we found things we weren't expecting. Some other things for structural, to test structural stability in our roof for additional rooftop units. And the list goes on and on and on. I won't read them all to you, but the budget impact is there in front of you, and the impact there is also noted. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Chris, has there been any substantive change to our timeline on the project as a result of this?
Not as a result of these. I will get into a little bit more detail about timeline when I get to the construction update. Randy's not with us this evening. He's on vacation with his family, so I'll cover that portion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Board policy 3.02 BBFA by Dr. Jameson.
Thank you. Annually, policy BBFA has to be approved by the board. The policy, in essence, outlines the conflict of interest and financial disclosure that each board member has to complete. And this is being brought forward for a vote later in the day. Any questions about board policy BBFA?
Thank you. Okay. Board committees, Dr. Jameson.
They updated this. All right, so I'm excited to bring forth for discussion to the board just some conversation around board committees, advisory committees, and any other ad hoc committees that the board would like to designate for purpose of serving the district and any goals that are outlined by the board. And so as we think about the policy that's outlined, it basically talks about the ability of the board to work as a whole, but then also, again, to appoint temporary people and then also serve to liaison on some of the committees as well. And so the purpose for this presentation is because we have a number of policies currently that, a number of committees that are currently in place that are basically dormant and have not been voted to be terminated. And we also have committees that from consideration and conversation need to be installed. And so as we think about what we have here and also the purpose of the committees to our community, our committees allow the board to ensure participation by our community. So there are multiple ways that our community can actually participate. One way is actually committees. Another way is public comment, as we saw just a moment ago, and also via communication email. So what you see before you are a list of potential recommendations, and I'll go through and explain why these committees are being either recommended to terminate or to rename or to transition into a liaison committee or representation. So one of the pieces when the board serves as a committee, what typically happens is that the board members responsible for setting the agenda and ensuring that the minutes are being collected. But the other piece of that is to work in coordination with the superintendent and administration around meeting the needs of the district. So the first few that you see here that are outlined, you have the advocacy committee, board development, calendar review, community engagement, wellness, and fundraising. Now, some of these committees are actually required as a part of board policy, and some of them also are supposed to include the purpose of the committee, the time frame for the committee, as well as what the ending objectives or outcomes are. And so as we go through, you will find that some of the committees actually have a purpose and a rationale detailed, and others don't. And then some of the committees do not have objectives outlined to ensure that the board is able to monitor those. So the advocacy committee is one of the committees that we discussed. It did not have a rationale listed, but from conversation and looking at historical information that did exist, and for most of them, there was not a lot of information that exists to give you detail of what the committee actually focused in on, as well as any actions that actually surfaced from the varying committees. And so this committee, and you'll see it come back in a later slide, is being recommended to terminate. And as a result of the termination of this particular committee, a new committee will be established, and that committee will focus in more on how we support any legislative changes that we want to see as a school district, primarily from the board level. The next one is board development. I thought that this was an interesting committee, and really it's about how do we professionally develop our board members. And so currently the board meets twice a month. One is for regular business, the other is for work sessions. So the board recently completed a survey. That survey gave the superintendent and also administration ideas around areas where the board would like to be developed, and a scope and sequence for that development will take place. And so a committee is not necessarily warranted to facilitate board development. Therefore, the recommendation for this one is to vote to terminate. And you can see there also indicated onboarding process as well. And so through the assistance of the board, we have identified onboarding that's broken up into month 0 to 1, 1 to 3, and so forth. And that outlines whether or not it's introduction to policy, looking at committees, and also the mission of the district. So that information is already included in the onboarding process. The others I won't spend a great deal of time on. So the calendar review in policy, the board has to approve the calendar, but they do not have to facilitate the committee. And so the recommendation here is to actually vote to terminate the calendar review committee, but have it to be district-led and then have a liaison appointed. Community engagement, again, that's another one that did not have a purpose. And I do want to be clear that while these committees are being recommended for termination, it does not necessarily mean that the work associated with the committees is not occurring. So as we think about community engagement, if we are actually having conversations with families who have students of color, if we are actually participating in PTO events and interacting within the community, we are given an opportunity for them to actually engage. The last two, one, the wellness committee, again, required by policy, but that does not necessarily dictate that the board has to own that committee. So that work still will continue. We would vote to terminate the actual committee and actually assign a liaison to that one, and that one would be district-led as well. And then the last one is the fundraising committee. We do see power in fundraising, but the purpose of this particular committee is for scholarship, and the board actually raises funds to support district students on their efforts to college. And so we're voting to terminate the committee, but it will actually establish a new committee, which is a cleaner way to actually identify what this particular committee is, which is a scholarship committee. Looking at additional committees, and I just denoted with an asterisk that some of these committees were actually terminated, but per policy, they needed to be terminated with the board vote. So technically they have not been in existence, but we wanted to make sure that we have documented that the board voted to terminate these particular committees. And so you see a couple where it says African American Community Advisory Council. I currently have a group that I meet with that will address that, and the others you see there. So teaching and learning and the middle school, high school task force, and then also safe and inspirational spaces. And that one we actually will be coming back to because we will like to address the safety piece of it as we think about all of the school shootings and challenges that are happening societally. And so really focusing in on how do we ensure that we keep our staff and students safe. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that further on. And then also the ECC construction committee. So really we're not trying to eliminate our community's ability to become engaged and involved, but really be intentional around how these particular committees align to goals. And you'll hear more about the goals that we're working towards when we begin the strategic planning process. So these are the recommended committees that we are will be recommending for establishment by vote by the board. And so previously you heard me reference the fundraising committee. The fundraising committee would actually be replaced by the scholarship committee. So the recommendation would be to vote to establish that. There are some clear next steps for all of these committees, and I'll detail those out a little later. And then the other committee that is being recommended to establish is the Legislative Advocacy Committee. And this one is key as we talk about a lot of the pieces that we need to be enacted from our legislature. And so we're hoping to develop this and also a process and a rationale with some objectives for the upcoming year. And so I wanted to be clear about the board liaison groups so that everyone knows which committees would actually be liaisons. And so we would have a liaison on the calendar committee, wellness committee, Joe's Place, MSBA, including an alternate, SSD Governing Council, including an alternate, and then the School Safety Advisory, which is the one that is going to replace the Safe and Inspirational Spaces. That is all I have in regards to the committees. At this time, I welcome any questions you may have.
I just want to thank you for all the work you put into getting this list together and helping us decide what to terminate and what needed to be renamed, et cetera. It was a long list, and you had to do a lot of work to find out were certain committees still in existence? Were they voted on, et cetera? It was a lot of work. So I really, really appreciate the time that you and your staff put into it.
Dr. Jameson, I wanted to just put it out there that I think we've discussed previously that there may be opportunity to create more committees out of our strategic planning process, and to just confirm that there is opportunity beyond tonight to continue to refine this committee structure and add new ones as needed.
That is correct. One that did not come forward at this time is the creation of an equity committee. And so that will be coming back to the board for establishment for a vote through recommendation. And when I give the update for the strategic planning, which I'm excited about, there will be opportunities, particularly around goals. So I'm excited about the work that will be done in the company with whom we'll be working. So that's exciting work.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, everyone. Admin communications, COVID-19 update.
Awesome. So I do not have a formal update, of course, because school is out and we do not have any student data to report, but I will always start off the same way that I start off typically. We are still in a pandemic, and I know that we think that we are not, but there are new variants that have surfaced, and we have reconvened our COVID task force meetings. And so what I wanted to share are some of the things that are currently being discussed, and also the direction for school districts. And there will not be one direction for any school district. And as I go through some of the items, some of the school districts will not be reviewing data. They will not have thresholds. And so they're starting off as if there isn't a pandemic. And so some of the things that we should be mindful of right now, the algorithm is currently being modified. This one was important for me to bring forward because we had a lot of parents who expressed concerns, specifically if their children were asthmatic or also had allergies. So that information will be brought forward to the board for review during the next COVID update, in addition to COVID leave. And so the board voted last year to continue with COVID leave. COVID leave expired on June 30th, and no school district locally is continuing with COVID leave. They are requiring staff to use their sick time. The other items that I want to bring forward is review of thresholds. At this time, I'm not making a recommendation for changes to our threshold. If you recall, the board approved a change only for summer school. So I wanted to remind our community that that was only for summer school. So we'll continue with the same threshold. And then the other item of discussion that we discussed was review of metrics. And so we will continue to report our data as we did previously. St. Louis County currently is not taking a stance on what school districts should do. So we pretty much are developing our plan of action as we head into the fall. So those are the updates that I have for today. I welcome any questions you may have.
Dr. Jameson, thank you so much. As we get closer and closer to the start of school, I know all of us are waiting impatiently to know what it's going to look like. Our next board meeting, I believe, will be after school starts. And so I'm assuming that communication will be in the form of Twitter, Facebook, mass communication, email, just to let our families know that we're aware they're going to be asking questions, but we don't have the answers yet. And we're going to get there, and we will forward that as soon as we are able.
That's correct. And actually, they are already asking questions. We had the Meet the Principal for the elementary school, and a few of those actually surfaced up to the top. I actually plan to put an item on our work session early August prior to, so that way that information is made available to our families. But I will be very honest, I'm concerned with the transmission of the new variants. And so the epidemiologists and the pediatricians in our task force are saying, yes, we know that vaccinations decrease the impact of the virus on those who are vaccinated, but they are saying that even those who are vaccinated are contracting COVID with the new variants. And so with families having their students out summer, the varying engagements that they have, starting the school year and thinking about how do we continue to keep our doors open, which has always been the goal of the board, and also administration is really where I am right now in our planning.
Thank you. Construction update, Chris?
Good evening again. So the construction update, I think, given the proximity to the start of the school year, I think I'll just jump in to pick up where we left off with Amber's question on the schedule. So the schedule has slipped, if you will, just a little bit. We met with principals yesterday at our regular construction meeting. We brought Dr. Smith and Dr. Dietrich in to start discussing some strategies should some of these areas not be fully complete and ready for students at the start of school. We are having some problems with the biggest problem we're having right now is with our plumbing on the east stack. When I say east stack, that means all 4 restrooms on the east side of the building, plus the 2 new additional restrooms that we're adding on 3R and 4R. Those are our 2 gender neutral restrooms. So what does that mean? I see shaking heads. Sorry, speaking in coded language. So in the high school where the math classrooms are, where Miss Carmen and Mr. Brazuco and Mr. Spinks were teaching, there is an elevator shaft right there with a closet. Well, we're turning that closet into a restroom with 4 stalls. And then directly above that is 4R, which is the math, we call it the 7th grade hallway for the middle school. So that long hallway where Mr. Hensky and all the rest of the teachers there are, at the end of that hallway, directly above the math classrooms, we're adding another restroom. So those will be specifically for the middle school, because as you remember, the middle school is moving down into the classrooms that are currently high school math classrooms. It's all very confusing. When we walk the spaces, you'll understand. So I apologize for that. So we are prioritizing the 3R and 4R additional restrooms because those will be primarily the restrooms that the middle school will have access to without crossing into high school territory. So part of what we're doing right now is trying to further segment the 2 populations, understanding that, of course, we still do have the shared spaces at the cafeteria, the art room, the music rooms, the drama rooms, some of those spaces that we just can't avoid. But for the purposes of general instruction, we are making those separations. I, in my heart, which isn't worth much, feel like we're going to have more restrooms than that complete. However, we do have to face the reality that the plumbers union hall is empty. There are no additional plumbers. We have the plumbers now working 10-hour shifts on Saturdays. That's what some of the change orders are. We will move to Sundays here shortly, which we've been avoiding just because it's double time, but we've got to get these things done. Yeah, overtime rules for the labor unions is just a little bit different than what we would expect in other areas. Anything over 8 hours on the daily is considered overtime. So if they work 10 hours on Thursday, which today they did, 8 hours of that is regular time, and then 2 hours of that's premium time, not based on a 40-hour week. So that is an acceptable cost for us to absorb. Saturdays are all time and a half, which again, the work has to happen anyway. So really it's just the 0.5 premium. Sundays are though, that is double time, and we're going to have to move there. We're throwing as many plumbers as we possibly can, trying to get this work done. All of the finishes are in place. The rough-in work is what we're struggling with. We ran into asbestos. We ran into walls that we didn't know were there once we tore down walls that were there. So enough with the excuses. We're working as hard as we can to get this done. Everyone understands the importance. It's a zero-fail mission. So rest assured that if one or so of these restrooms is not complete, it's not because we didn't move heaven and earth to get these things done. But again, for what it's worth, which is probably not much, I do think that we're going to have more done than I'm giving you here the picture of here. So there's that. The library, today we spent a lot of time in our construction phasing and calendaring meeting to look for any impediments, anything that is blocking a straight line path from where we are today to where we need to be for completion. So one of those areas was the library, the Research and Design Center. Inside of there, we've created a rather large makerspace where the cafe area used to be. So in that makerspace, at least for this next year, we'll be having 4 periods that will be meeting there. That space, because it's an instructional space that's already in our master schedules, has to take priority over the rest of the library. So we are straight line moving everything from all labor and efforts from the regular library over to the makerspace. We are changing some of the flooring options because we feel like they're more durable and will save time. That space is going to get done. We're fairly certain within the first week or 2 of school that the rest of the library will be done as well. So again, we're removing any barriers that we see to instructional spaces so that we can streamline that work to make sure that we have things done. Today we had 11 electricians on site, which is like a record. Power Up has been doing a really good job of allocating their resources. They've also been working 10s and Saturdays. So the steel iron workers have been working 10s and Saturdays. The masons are moving right along. You're starting to probably see brick rise up out of the ground on the front facing section of the cafeteria expansion. Today, again, I forced everyone to walk around the campus with me because we're adding an agenda item to our construction meetings, which is start of school site readiness. So right now it looks like a construction site, but there are still those areas where if you make a wrong step, you're going to fall in a hole. That's not acceptable for the start of school. There's some just regular construction debris lying around that's unsightly. Our community needs to be presented with our best possible face when we open our doors for kiddos. So one of the areas that TRICO is going to be focusing on beginning tomorrow is cleaning up the site and adding additional construction fencing and making things as ready as we possibly can and safe for the return of our teachers and students. I'm trying to think if there's anything else critical here. Oh, cafeteria. Cafeteria furniture is coming on August 12th. So there's really no stopping that because it's a bunch of stuff and there's nowhere else to put it. So we are focusing on that cafeteria. There are 8 stalls, restroom stalls down in that spot too, which is super exciting. They're on the west side of the building. So they are going to be done. I'd love to show you a picture. Maybe Ed made it down there and that made it into his video. So the tile is up, the rough end's done, finishes, meaning the stalls and the water closets, as they call them in the industry, are going in. And those will be additional restrooms should some of the others not be complete. There's so much work going on. I'm really excited to walk you all around. You won't recognize some of the spaces. And I've also told them that I will be walking you around. So a little bit of extra polish on some of the doorknobs, please, so that we can make sure that our board and community get the best look possible. I know I talked a lot. I'm hopeful that I answered your questions. If not, I can answer those now.
I definitely appreciate you adding on to the agenda item, this readiness for school, because that's super important. We want to make sure that everyone is safe and that we've gotten as much completed as we can before school starts. Thank you for all of your hard work and time to this project.
You're
Does
very
anybody
welcome.
else have questions?
If I'm having a bad hair day on, by your opinion, it's because I had a hard hat on most of the day. So
I think you're fine. Ed, can you give us one of our favorites, which is the Prop E video?
The contractors look at me kind of sideways when I enter that building, or even just the outdoor workspace without a helmet. So I've started wearing mine as well. I am pleased to tell you that nearly everything that Chris just said will be visualized here this evening. So I have the audio switched on. This is the main entrance. This is 2 mornings ago. We're putting the beams in that are the superstructure for the the new main entrance that used to be where the central office was. So they got that accomplished right there in one morning between 7 a.m. and noon. So that
Hey,
function
good morning, Board of Education. Just wanted to give you a quick tour here with Mr. Ed Rich. So this will be the new entrance to the middle school. As you can see, this is the old 3R that goes down. We'll have 2 classrooms right here. This will be our sustainability room with Miss Bree Parks. The next room will be our makerspace classroom and tech room with Dr. Graham. Let me show you our offices real quick. Still getting unpacked, but they just put the signage up the other day. It looks wonderful. So here we'll have Miss Jonas, and then this desk we will have Mr. Hunt, who is our new attendance secretary. We have the principal's office. As you can see, there's a window they still need to replace and get some blinds up and tint some windows. Come in, this is our teacher workroom. Dr. Maxwell, hard at work here.
Happy summer.
This will be Miss Brown, our school counselor. One thing we're really excited about is our new conference room. We've never had a nice conference room for middle school, so this is a huge upgrade for us. You can see we're getting locks ready for students. This is our file room.
Ooh.
And our restroom. The lights are supposed to turn on. Anyway, they do come on at some point. This is one thing that was really important to us. This is our mom's room. New moms had to use a math supply room with books all over the place to take care of any needs. So that'll be a room for new moms for middle school and high school. This will be our new teacher's lounge. We will have a refrigerator, dishwasher, and then the rest will be new furniture from Color Art. And on the other side of that, that is Mr. Mejan's intervention math room. Continuing down, that'll be Mr. Mejan's door. We're maintaining the next classroom as a full space, and this will be Ms. Kruger, and this will be our gifted room. Right now it's storing quite a bit for other classrooms as well that are under construction. Mr. Rich swings around. This is where we have new lockers going in. Our population of students continues to grow, so we need new lockers. And then we used to have one small room for special school district for 3 teachers. We'll now have 2 classrooms for 3 teachers, which typically every hour there's a SSD teacher who's floating in rooms doing in the classroom instruction. So 2 classrooms should work great for us. As you can see, this will be one of our new restrooms. All of the restrooms for our middle school this year will be ungendered. So if Mr. Rich swings around, you'll see the doors. We'll actually have full-length doors on all of the stalls for privacy. And then the sinks will be on the rear wall back here. So all of our restrooms will be that way. So every student will have privacy when they're using the restroom. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Dr. Dietrich. And here we are inside the cafeteria that Chris was referring to. It appears to be the busiest space lately. This is me standing on the steps that used to descend down into the cafeteria that right now it ends in kind of a cliff or a precipice. That's a good vantage point to just at the space, the size of the space. And then this used to be the old boiler room. All right, we're on the south side now. Things are really progressing on the cafeteria expansion. Another good view, the dimensions. Just wanted to throw this in because a lot of what they do is for safety reasons. This is them putting up beams to shore up the trench that is dug along where the tiers used to be on the commons. And there is the aforementioned makerspace that Chris was talking about in the Research and Design Center. Shot just yesterday, so that's what we got.
All of those spaces look even very, very different from just yesterday. It's pretty incredible to see how things are moving. There's not one area of the building where there's not a construction person.
The Research and Design Center looks so different. So does the boiler room.
The boiler room is actually done now.
Wow.
Yeah, I got lost down there the other day. I was given a tour and I'm like, I can't even get out of the space. I'm stuck. That's how different it is.
Well, thank you. That was, as always, it's encouraging to see the changes that have been made. And tell Dr. Dietrich, thank you so much for narrating for us.
You bet.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay. School nutrition services update, Chris?
Okay. Well, Ms. Sharp is not with us this evening. She's on vacation this week. So I'll get you updated. Actually, there's not much of an update at this point, other than I've been seeing some emails come in from Chartwells that they believe they've chosen our director. What they call a director is sort of different meanings to that term for MRH than it is for them. So essentially, the Irene, the food service manager that they've hired, and they are still hiring the other employees. They've assigned to us the director that's over at Bayless right now. So she's managing this project. She and I are meeting every week now on Mondays. And we've been communicating via email, and the next steps are for them to come in and place safety signage, safety equipment, new knife racks, those types of things. There's certainly a different standard when it comes to what they're going to provide this year. Not that what we provided wasn't at a standard. This one is just a different standard. So things are going to look a little bit different when kids move in. Ed's been working with Fernando. He's one of the officials with Chartwells that's been assigned to us. They've engaged the marketing plan for the community. So expect to see some more about what you can expect as a parent, and also our students when they come into the cafeterias at the start of school. We do, at this point, I feel like all of our currently employed MRH food service workers are returning. That's always a bit of a wonder as we come up to the run at the start of school here. But I have not heard that any of them are not coming back. So I'm pretty excited about that. That way, at least our students will have some familiarity with the faces that they see when they come through the lines. And I think that's important, at least to me. And other than that, there's really not much. I expect to start seeing food deliveries come in the week of August 15th. Oh, and when we go on tour, the construction sites, I will show you the new integrated freezer and cooler that they installed in the old teen kitchen. I saw it yesterday, and it's incredible. You could put a couple beds in there and sleep in there if you wanted to. That's how large those spaces are. So that's pretty much takes up the entire old teen kitchen. So we'll be able to definitely expand, and the dry storage spaces are almost complete as well. So we're looking forward to the start of school with Chartwells. Any questions?
Chris, could you just clarify for the benefit of those who are joining us tonight who may not have known about this transition, what the employment arrangement is between our returning cafeteria workers and Chartwells?
Sure. Essentially, we are retaining all of our food service workers that were formerly employed by MRH, or currently employed by MRH, I should say. They are all invited to remain. And then Chartwells will replace the food service manager. Of course, ours had resigned earlier in the school year, in May, I believe that was. Maybe March. Anyway, they are replacing that person and any other positions based on the workload that we reported to them in the contract documents. And then should one of our employees, heaven forbid, but should any of our current food service employees decide to move on, then they would be replaced then with one hired by Chartwells. So we would replace them through attrition, as they say. Good question.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions? Okay. Discover Club update, Dr. Jameson.
Dr. Jameson, you're muted.
I thought I was fixing it. I said I'm doing one screen because last time I lost my presentation. So now I'm doing one screen and I'm muting myself. Good evening. I know this is a hot topic for our community, and so I'll be giving an update on Discover Club and now our partnership with YMCA through the for the elementary school. And I just want to remind everyone that, like, nationally, regionally, and locally, the pandemic has impacted not only MRH's ability to recruit and retain staff for aftercare positions, but surrounding districts are experiencing the same strain as well. And STL Today actually released a timely article that I read that really highlighted the impact of the pandemic and the shortages that exist. And I would even say for even some of those districts that have increased their salaries, they're still finding that those positions are not being filled. And so we do have some solutions. So I'm excited about the update today, but also want to highlight the work that we have been doing thus far. So our registration process, I want to be very transparent and say that we do have some work to do as we think about how our families express their interest in Discover Club, particularly. This won't particularly be an issue as we transition to the partnership with YMCA, because YMCA will actually facilitate and lead all of the application process, collection of funds, and things of that nature with our families. But what I will say is that from a historical standpoint, we have had some improvements with the registration process, and I think the pandemic had forced us into that. So no more lawn chair lines in the morning, and the drop box was created. But with the drop box, it's very clear that the process itself needs to be codified and be more visible to our families, because part of that really is through how our families access Dropbox and whether or not they can access it earlier than the time allotted for submission of applications. So that's some work that we need to do as well. And so if you look at what's on the slides, you'll look at the priority of applications received. And so currently the way that it works is that families submit their applications, their time stamped, and slots are provided based on the timestamp. And so as we think about our equity policy and how we identify who needs aftercare most, as we think about making modifications to the process, this is something that we will take into consideration to ensure that we keep equity at the forefront. In addition to the current way that we register, we do give preference to siblings. And then this year, a notification was sent to families who did receive slots. Some of the families for the elementary school have not yet received notification based on YMCA facilitating that process. And so we do recognize that we have some work to do to ensure that the process is clear to our families. And you'll see later on in the presentation some next steps for the district. I do want to highlight that currently what is expected for families for waitlist notification, as we bring on new staff and looking at the ratios, which we'll talk about a little bit later. For our pre-K classrooms, the ratio is 1:10. For K through 6, the ratio is 1:16. And so as we bring on new staff, families will be notified based on their placement in the wait list. And so we have begun to compile a list of childcare facilities and things of that nature to share with families within our zip code. But again, I'm excited to report that I'll be sharing our next steps and some opportunities for our families. So I want to go into what our current reality is. It's very clear that there is a need. The need is much more critical at the ECC. And part of that is because of our pre-K students and our enrollment in pre-K and the ratio, which I indicated before, but you can see currently where we are. And so the number of applications that we received for ECC, 145, elementary applications, 61. YMCA is confident that they can actually meet the application request for the elementary school. Currently, they have 48 enrolled. And again, they will bear responsibility to notify families in regards to their enrollment. And the gap for the ECC currently, if you're looking at it from a percentage standpoint, is 55%. And so please know that we recognize that there is a need. Not only do we provide quality aftercare for our students, our families who work need that. And it was very evident through the emails that I received. So I read them all, I responded to them all. And please note that we do understand the dire situation that our families are in. So I wanted to give another cross-section of where we are as it relates to registration by grade level. And so you'll see the breakdown there. I did do a poll of our surrounding school districts. And again, a lot of them have vacancies for their aftercare programs, even after they have increased the rates of pay. And we found that to be the same last year when we increased the rate for our bus drivers to $20, with the assumption that we would see an increase in applicants, but that didn't necessarily materialize additional applicants. I think with the increase, we might have received 1 or 2 additional driver applicants for our vacant positions. Because it's important that we be fully transparent about our application cadence. And so I'll talk a little bit more about our efforts shortly, but from July 2021 and thinking about where we are currently, you can see how many applicants we have received, as well as how many of them were actually hired, and then how many we were able to retain. So we have had 10 applicants for the vacant positions. And one of the questions that was asked in the emails, have we considered students? The answer is yes, but please keep in mind that our students are very much involved in extracurricular activities at the high school. And of those 3, by the time we got to the point of interviewing them, they had conflicts with the extracurricular activities by which they were involved. We did have 3 staff members, and that staff member actually resigned last week to take full-time employment. So this is something that I've been really tooling around, and with the help of my team, trying to get an understanding of where this requirement lies. So we have a licensing agency, we have accreditation agency, and we also have Head Start. And so as we think about who has access to Discover Club, of our population, only 7 of our students receive subsidy to support for aftercare. But this has been noted as being a barrier. So the good news is we have communicated with our licensing agency, who's working to support our efforts due to the shortage, and we are able to submit for a waiver. And so we're working to get additional information regarding what that will entail. But there is also another piece to that, because that's the licensing agency. We still have to discuss the requirements for Head Start and also accreditation. And so those are all very different. But as we're going through this process, it became very clear that that information needed to be communicated to our families as well. So that information will be updated in the handbook this upcoming year. So potential budget impact. We talked a little bit about where we are regionally, and we did do a SWOT to see what our neighboring districts are actually paying. So the average rate for those districts who are still offering care, so I want to be clear about that, is averaging about $15. And so you have Ladue that offered before and after care. They now only offer before and after care to their pre-K. None of their elementary school students have access to aftercare. You have districts like University City, who are not offering aftercare. You have shortages in Webster Groves, Kirkwood, and Valley Park School District, like us, is currently partnering with YMCA. So here's what the impact is, and without going into too much detail, we have 2 current Discover Clubs that does not include the Discover Club supervisor that everyone knows is Betty. So of those 2, the budget impact to bring those individuals up to $15 an hour for the 22-23 school year would be approximately $1,832, plus or minus. I did try to calculate for Social Security, Medicare, and those things. And to fill the gap at the ECC, we would need 10, but more specifically 11, because you can't 0.5 a person, in order to offer a slot for each of our students who is seeking aftercare. And the budget impact for that would be approximately $114,000. And that would be starting all of those new hires at $15 an hour. So the total budget impact would be approximately $134,000. So what have we done so far, and then what will we do next? So a lot of the questions that have been asked, what I recognize is that being transparent in your communication is key. And so while we were doing the work, communicating this work on a regular basis would have been beneficial to our families. So we did communicate towards the end of the year the shortages, and we did send out surveys really trying to ascertain what the needs were in our community. But as we continue to approach the year, we needed to continue to convey the staff shortages. And so we surveyed families. We did increase the pay of Discover Club staff. I have said repeatedly that we do need to explore and examine how competitive we are in relation to surrounding districts. So while our starting salary is $12, prior to the $12 increase, staff were getting paid less than the $12. We do have a plan in place, but in the current climate, that plan is not aggressive enough to get us to where we need to be, and that board is committed to getting to that $15 mark. As mentioned before, we've offered opportunities to high school students. I loved our patron comments and looking at neighboring districts, but I will tell you, I asked about that, and they too still cannot fill those gaps. And so thinking about students and their responsibilities, whether it be working or extracurriculars, they really don't have an interest to participate in roles like that. We've extended opportunities for support and certified staff. So last year, seats were offered, and we really didn't have staff. And so being quite honest, this is not a new challenge. We just were able to make it work. And we did that with teachers. And so as we think about teacher burnout and turnover and some of the stress and strain and mental health of our staff, it wouldn't be prudent for us to ask our staff to work a full shift and then also do 3 additional hours. But the budget impact for those few staff members who stepped up in the time of need for our community totaled about $19,000 for the window of time that they were able to support. We've increased postings thanks to Ed. We had postings at the local Schnucks marquee. We looked at varying employment sites. We did share information with local universities and also collaborating again with our local agencies regarding the child care requirements. So it sounds like we'll be able to get a waiver. And then we also partnered with the YMCA. And so we did ask if they had capacity for the ECC. At this time, they don't. They too are also experiencing shortages. And we also looked into partnering with Arches that also provides support, and then the potential for Boys and Girls Club. Prior to the summer, we also reached out to the Heights. What we found is that the students that they were using for aftercare were actually college students, and those students had since departed back and were no longer available. So just to kind of highlight some next steps, and prior to completing this presentation, I didn't have the information that I'll share after review. We will continue to reach out to partners because again, I do believe that it's important for the district to partner with our community. And then also looking at flexibility with the course requirement, which it sounds like we will be able to submit a waiver. So we are making progress with that. We are examining long-term impact of salary increases on budget. And so I want to pause there for a moment because there is a domino effect. We do have other staff members, you heard previously, that are food service staff that we are retaining. Most of them are close to $15 an hour, but they are not quite at $15 an hour. So as we think about increasing the rates for the Discover Club positions, we might also lose some of our staff members that are in positions that are also critical for the district. So it can create gaps and holes that we didn't necessarily anticipate. So there are some unintended consequences. But again, the board has been and has continued to have discussion about really meeting that cost of living wage for our staff. And I am certain that we'll be able to get there. And so we also thought about looking at a fee waive. And so we meet weekly in our cabinet meetings. And during the meeting, we talked about the potential for doing that. So if we do have staff, whether it's support staff, who are willing to work, but they don't want to work for the wages and also have to pay if their children have to actually access the care. And so the potential to actually waive the fee for them if they're going to serve in the capacity of a Discover Club worker. We're looking at a sliding scale as well as the impact of increasing rates. And so I just want to be really clear. One of the reasons why what I love about MRH is the focus on equity. And so I know it's easy for us to say, let's increase the rates, but there are also some families who may not necessarily have the ability to pay new increased rates. And so we want to make sure that our services are accessible to all and that we're not creating barriers for those families. So again, keeping that in mind as we were looking at solutions, and then being creative, because now it's not time to continue with our traditional thinking. And so we do have custodian vacancies. And so now what the HR department is offering for those individuals who have part-time work is, do you want to do custodial work and also maybe pair that with an aftercare position? So I'll keep the board and community posted on that. And then looking at a future recommendation to the board around increases in salaries for these positions that are not necessarily at $15. So that's not just Discover Club, but also thinking about the remaining food service workers that we have, because it's not enough to increase the salary for people who are coming in. We have to think about the staff that we have and maintaining them. For long-term, what you see there are grant opportunities. Now, we missed out on the last window of that. The 21st Century Grant is an ideal grant for the district because we can partner with the YMCA, the School Age Community Program Grant is another of those grants to open back up in 2024. So we will ensure that we partner to submit for a grant collaboratively with whatever agency with whom we'll be working. And then looking at an equitable registration process. Right now, we have our new federal program staff person who has been a delight to work with. And she's already thinking about how do we ensure that there's a timeline outline for families they understand and are communicated with when their applications are received, and then notifying them when their child will be placed. And then you can see the rest there, criteria for prioritization for those families who really need it. And that's one, honestly, that I struggle with because we all need it, but how do we determine who needs it most? And it never feels good because it always feels like somebody is losing something. And that goes back to the district's equity policy. And I've already mentioned the transparent timeline for families and then placement lists. And then the last one is revising the family handbook. So we do have a family handbook, but all of the things that we're discussing now are not in the handbook. So what good is it to our families if the information is not there? So we recognize that work needs to be done. And sometimes you have to have a problem in order to see those areas that need to be addressed. And so what I am excited about before I get to questions is that I lost a lot of sleep over this. As a parent who currently accesses aftercare for my own child to be able to serve here in the district, it is critical. And so I do recognize that our families need it. And so I was thinking about how do we make this work? So we currently partner with Kelly Services and we have support staff who are on staff through Kelly Services. And I had Dr. Ambrose Phillips to reach out to say, hey, can you fill the gap for us? And so the great news is they can. And with the waiver, we should be able to get care for all of our families and also have an opportunity to onboard these individuals. And what I appreciate about what Dr. Ambrose Phillips shared is that we could put subs, which would rotate people through, but our families also want consistency. And so this solution right now, while it is not ideal and definitely doesn't address the shortage concerns that are happening regionally, it will allow us an opportunity to offer care to our families while we still continue to problem solve around a long-term solution. That's all I have right now. At this time, I welcome any questions you may have.
Dr. Jameson. Oops.
This is incredible, the work that you've done in such a short amount of time. I too have been losing sleep over this. As a former single mom of 2 kids, I had this situation happen to me when my kids were very young, and it was gutting. The experience was horrible, and it's hard to think about how many people throughout our region don't have someone like you to magically find a solution to solve it. And so I hope that all of the parents who reached out with all their creativity and energy, and hopefully you can lend some of that energy to this problem more broadly than just for our district, because it's a huge problem. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts, and thank you so much, Dr. Jameson, for everything you do.
Thank you.
Dr. Jameson, I would like to echo Annie's thoughts. It is absolutely amazing what you accomplished in 4 days. And I truly appreciate your dedication and perseverance. And I know that all of us on the board care about this matter. And I am just so grateful for your leadership. My one question is, so those families that are scrambling with the ECC, does this mean they can stop scrambling? Will they get some sort of information today or tomorrow? Where are we at?
Great question. So I think, of course, you guys know I was out today. So I was with my family, and Dr. Ambrose Phillips emailed me, and I was like, yes, we have a solution. So we have not even had a chance to kind of work through what that looks like. And so when I got in today, I actually just touched base. She asked some clarifying questions. So we're going to address that and get that information out to families as soon as possible. We also need to identify a date for training, which was the other question that Dr. Ambrose Phillips inquired about, because they will have to go through the training that's required so that they can welcome our littles in for aftercare. So just give us at least until Monday close of day to work through some of the kinks, and information should be distributed as we get additional information from Kelly Services.
Dr. Jameson, I want to thank everyone that has worked so hard to help us come up with a solution. I know that today was a difficult day for your family. I want to thank you for all the work that you did leading up to today, but especially at such a difficult time. I also want to thank the families who emailed us and had proposals. We love that. So, proposing solutions. We are all a team in this effort of trying to work through the issues that arise. And so just thank you to everyone who donated their time, ideas, and energy to this issue. It is unfortunately not an issue that's going to end. We're going to keep having this issue, but coming together and working together to find a solution is what MRH is all about. And it's just awesome to see.
I want to echo that and confirm that the work we've been doing all year in CBTF and the Compensation and Benefits Task Force is really around ensuring that we can pay a living wage to all of our workers. And Dr. Jameson noted we put together a schedule that was less aggressive than this. And I think, we're going to have to look hard at all of the impacts this will have throughout the district. We're not just raising pay for Discover Club workers. Every minimum wage worker needs that same elevation. And we are committed to it. And we thank our community for appreciating the investment that requires. our people are our greatest resource, and we want to invest in them and we want to retain them. And it's been a really challenging year. And I want to applaud you, Dr. Jameson, for working so hard on finding a way forward for that. And to you also, Dr. Ambrose Phillips, for lending your expertise and magic to this process. And we're really excited for what you're going to be able to do going forward with employee retention.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Jameson and Dr. Ambrose Phillips. And just to the board, as those emails were coming in, it's like our parents are amazing. They first, empathized with the school district. They understood, they gave solutions. They're willing to do this. And I just think once, this is over, well, it won't be over soon, but as you work things out and communicate with the parents, just also like a nice little thank you to them, because they have their concerns, and I was in that boat before, being a single mom in that boat. But just, their input means so much. And, no one was really like upset with us. They were just concerned. And I think from all of us, just to say thank you, we appreciate you, just something.
I also want to point out, we have some new rock star people. Dr. Ambrose Phillips is new with us, and look at all that she's already done. So shout out to her. I know Chris McGee is on here too. He's also a rock star. Just we've made some good selections. So
yeah, and to our broader community, just remain patient with us. Let's give the new team a little bit of grace and time for the next couple days to put together their plan. And Dr. Jameson, thank you for your transparency with the board throughout this whole process. Sometimes the community doesn't get to see and hear what we get to see and hear. So, and thank you for being on it, and thank you for your replies, your quick replies.
I actually enjoy emailing our families back, and Kat will tell you that I talk about advocacy, and I love advocacy, whether they are disappointed in a decision or whether they support it, because it is the feedback that they provide. And our community, I was talking to someone and I said, our community organizes, whether it's organizing towards a cause, and we know what that cause was, or if it's organizing to say we need aftercare. And so I did not sleep. I was reflecting on how we can make it work. And I appreciate their support. And when I was responding back, they would respond back, thank you for your response. And so they really just want to be heard. And so I hope that our community know that they have been heard, and that we do want to continue to offer the level of care that we have offered in the past.
does anyone else have any questions?
Just a clarifying question, because I know the slide, when we referenced the elementary school, had a little bit of a gap between the number of families that had applied and what the YMCA is able to offer. Will we be able to fully support all of the elementary school families as well?
From my last update with Ms. Bouchard, she said that the Y said that they should be able to fill the gap. And so she sent her last email to me probably around 3:30 today. So I have not had a chance to connect with her to see where we are, because one of the questions that I asked is, I don't see any students enrolled. And she said it wasn't reflected because the Y does that. And so that's some of the piece that we'll probably have to iron out a little bit to make sure that that communication is still seamless to our families, since we aren't the ones to actually do it. And so I don't have an answer for that yet, power of yet, but I will definitely work with Ms. Bouchard to ensure that that communication is seamless.
Thank you. Where can families go, maybe on our website, to find out the answer to that? Because to piggyback off of what Maria said, of course, our families want answers as soon as possible. They are definitely scrambling around, and we want to stop them from having to scramble as soon as possible, but also want to give our staff a second to be able to get everything together as well. Is there a place that they can go, or a way that you would like them to communicate that helps them get that information when it's available, or know that it's not yet available but coming, so that they can focus on their families?
So I don't have an answer to that question. So I just wrote that down as an item to work towards for tomorrow. So I do know that There is a list that has been prepared for potential aftercare opportunities, but since we have identified a solution, it's more or less how do we get that information out? More specifically, what I'm thinking about is the timeliness of that. So we have a couple things we need to work out through Kelly Services, and then thinking about where individuals will be placed. And so just need a couple days to work through those, and then we can identify. I'm not sure where on the website the family handbook is housed. So if there is a spot there, I'm sure that we can add additional information as we build out. And so what's nice about the new website is that it is reactive and families can go on, so it's not stagnant like the one we had before. And so there is an opportunity there for us to actually use the website as a means to communicate with families too around Discover Club decisions. So I should be able to have a response regarding how we will do that in tomorrow's update.
Thank you so much. Okay, strategic planning.
So this one will be quick. I attached the PowerPoint just for the board and community to see the timeline. So we had our kickoff meeting on July 18th with Cabinet, and Insight actually explained the process, and we identified the timeline and worked backwards from the timeline so that the board can actually have a vote. The great news is the district was not selected to be in the first round of MSIP for continuous improvement. So that allows us to be very thoughtful in our process and planning. And we are anticipating having a finalized strategic plan to the board for vote in May. For immediate next steps, August 6th, Insight will be in district to work with the board to identify whether or not our current mission still is one that we subscribe to, in addition to creating a vision and core values. So if you go to the website, you'll see that we do have a mission, but we do not have vision and core values. So that will be some of the work that Insight does with the board. From there, the district is required to do a couple things. One, update and provide data, and that data includes discipline, information around academic achievement, attendance, any surveys that have been completed before. And then the last piece is for us to create a steering committee. And so part of that conversation with them was who is to be a part of the steering committee. And what they talked about is looking at transfer of individuals who have dual roles. So for example, if we have a parent who's also an employee, if we have a business owner within the community who also has children in the district, and then also ensuring that we have prominent members like mayors from the cities or city council members and things of that nature, but it also includes students, parents, community members, and any other key partners. And the reason why I wanted to lift this up is that the rubric has been, the draft rubric for the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has been released for the strategic plan. And so part of that scoring includes who did you have on your committee when you created your plan, and they're looking to see if you had a cross-section of individuals. What I want to uplift is that the role of my team is to ensure that we are identifying members that equitably represent our demographics and our student population. And so for me, that's making sure that we have either parents or students who identify as LGBTQIA ... or looking at families of color to be a part of that committee, and then also families who might have students who receive support from special school districts. So, and the last piece is having representation from staff as well as the grade levels and experience. So I'm excited about this work. We will continue to have updates to the board each month, giving feedback regarding where we are in the process and the progress that we're making. That's all I have regarding the strategic plan update. I welcome any questions you may have.
Dr. Jamieson, will there be an opportunity for community members to signal their desire to participate in the process? I ask in particular because we have a lot of engaged community members who've reached out to us recently, and we certainly want to have them more involved over a sustained period of time.
That is a great question. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. And actually, our new team member, Dr. Shonda Ambrose Phillips, asked if we wanted to survey parents. And so what I pointed out in my year-long listening and learning is that typically we have the same families completing the surveys. And so some of the groups that I talked about regarding representation don't take the surveys, but there will be opportunities, and we are working through how we would actually identify those individuals to be a part of the steering committee. So being strategic too, to make sure that we're covering some of those positions that typically wouldn't be on the steering committee, like I talked about, parents and staff members, and then also community members. So we are working with Insight to kind of craft what that will look like. The steering committee as a whole, we are capping at 35. That's to ensure that the work is manageable and doesn't get bogged down. But there will also be opportunities for our families to engage in surveys. And we talked about some focus groups, particularly with our families of color, and then also our students who identify as LGBTQIA, and then those who get support from special school districts. So they had discussed their ability to do that. And another part of the conversation included our work around the profile of a graduate. And so I'm really excited about that work, because during my listening and learning, a lot of our community members said that either, they MRH way aligned to who they were. And then we had several people in our population who said, that doesn't necessarily capture who I am. And so the work with the profile of a graduate will have us to begin to look at what competencies from an academic standpoint we want our students to have, and then any character traits that we want them to have. And so parents will have the ability to provide input for that, particularly as we think about our graduation rate and the number of students who go straight into the workforce. Feedback from our community will be critical.
Just to make sure I heard that correctly, I think I heard you say that community members may not really be signaling a desire to be on the steering committee. That may be a little more strategic the way that's composed, but there are certainly opportunities for community members to participate in other ways through the process.
Yes, correct. And so we have not yet detailed that out. We just had our first meeting with Insight, and we did talk about surveying and seeing who would be interested. So we had some preliminary discussions about who, but then also how do we get some of those individuals who are vocal, but don't necessarily show up for some of the other events. And so it will be a swan dance to make sure that we have a good cross-section of the district that represents who we are, so that we have a lot of groupthink as well as divergent thoughts as we seek to move forward.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, finance, Chris?
Okay, the June financial statements are probably the most boring or the least interesting of all the ones that I present to you, other than July. July's are pretty boring too, because not much has happened yet. But this is the culmination of a full 12 months of our fiscal year. I'm stalling so I can find it on my desktop here. I just had it. There we go. Let me share my screen. I'm sharing just the document so you don't make fun of my 40 plus tabs I have open. Okay, here we go. I'll let you read the items of interest there. As you look down here, for the most part, we zeroed out all of our revenues, meaning we brought them from budgeted to actual. Of course, some things always sneak in at the final hour after we've done that amendment, like our earned interest. We adjusted that one up, so we get as close as we possibly can. We had actually a rather sizable Medicaid payment come in under the wire there, which I'm glad we got it, trust me. So as we scroll through here, you can see, the revenue numbers are very close to what we had budgeted, and of course reset at 100%. I'm going to scroll past the function codes and straight to the object codes on the expenses. We left the expenses for the most part as where they landed in relation to the budget. So you can see here that salaries were about 95% of the budget. A smaller number than 100% here is desirable. That means that we spent less than we budgeted, which is, from my perspective, always great. You can see that on some of these, we did go up a little bit over in the categories here, but at the end of the day, purchase services was still significantly under budget. I do believe that that's mostly related to not being able to take some of those trips, PD trips and things that we had initially budgeted to do. So we scroll through here, get down to the bottom line here so we can move on. Right around 42% on the budgeted fund balance as it relates to percentage of expenditures, which is right around where we were projecting. We'll have the actual numbers. We're in the initial stages of our annual audit right now. And as we move a little bit deeper into the fall here, as we're preparing our governmental financial statements, which were much more in depth than these, that become part of the official record and of our financial statements that we present to the auditors and then to you for approval, we'll have actual fund balance numbers instead of these budgeted ones that you've been looking at for the last year. So these numbers do move around a little bit. So in July, we'll show them to you. They will be unaudited, but they will still be actual. So those I expect to shift just a little bit as we debate back and forth with the auditors where certain expenses should go. And sometimes we have differing opinions. Most of the time we line up pretty well. We have a great relationship with our auditors. So any questions?
This is probably a newbie question, sorry. But how, if at all, does the difference between June, as we're looking at it now, versus what we were looking at when you developed the fiscal 23 budget, how does that flow into that new year?
So if I understand your question correctly, essentially, let me use the revenues as an example. I think that's probably the easiest place to do. Actually, I can do it right here. It doesn't matter. Okay, so on this communications budget here, I think I scrolled too far. Hang on. Let me use something different. Okay, certificated salaries. We budgeted $8.39 million. We spent $8.25 million. So what you'll see instead of the budget in this column, you'll see like over here how we have actual. So this is, well, I'm rounded to the dollar what we spent on salaries in fiscal 21. This is with a little bit of expected fluctuation as we go through our audit here, but this will become an actual column and it'll just slide over. Does that make sense? And then as far as what we budgeted, what you saw in the budget documents, there is no correlation because we didn't have actuals at that point. So you'll see all of the columns in the actual budgeted document for fiscal 22 say budgeted, not actual. Everything prior to that shows actual. So that's just how that works. It's just a timing thing. But from July forward, you'll see actual numbers over on the fiscal 22, and this column becomes fiscal 23, where you'll see the budgeted number and then the year to date. And expect in July a lot of these numbers to be very, very small, if not zero, as we ramp up into the school year.
Maybe I'll ask it a different way. So when I'm looking at the last page of your presentation, I'm noticing that we budgeted for a slight deficit for fiscal 22.
Yes.
And we came out almost 2 million ahead, 2 million surplus.
Yep.
So our fund balance for 22 goes up, our funded percent goes up for 22. We expect some of that to carry forward into 23 then and change.
Yes. Okay. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, instead of the budgeted fund balance, it will be the actual fund balance. And I expect that number to be larger than I would expect to not see that as a deficit. It would be an actual number that would be higher. So part of that July 1 meeting as well, I'll be able to tell you what the actuals are and how much we were able to add or subtract to the various fund balances.
Thanks.
It was a good question. Thank you for clarifying.
Any other questions? Chris, was that or were you finished?
Oh, I'm done. Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
No, thank you. I am complete. I'll talk about it all night if you let me. So I'm gonna
Okay, moving on to board calendar of events. I have sent everybody an email about our board retreat. So if everyone can make sure they get back to me and make sure that that's on their calendar. We do have a work session scheduled for August 4th. We've got opening day for staff on August 17th and our Board of Education meeting on the 18th. We also have CBTF coming up in September and SSD Governing Council coming up in September as well. The first day of school, I believe, is the 23rd. It's quickly approaching. I know my kids are not excited yet, but I am. Does anyone else have any events that they'd like to mention or reference with regard to the calendar? Okay. Board committee report, CBTF?
Nothing to report. There's been no meetings.
Okay. And what about wellness committee?
The same, nothing to report, no meetings.
Okay. Fundraising committee?
It's been a great year for the fundraising committee. We're sorry to disband, but excited to become the scholarship committee.
I am on Joe's place, but there will be some transition, so I don't have anything to report at this time. And then what about SSD Governing Council?
No meetings.
Okay. So on to action items, construction change orders.
Move to approve change orders 18 and 19 as presented.
Thank you, Rachel.
Second.
Thank you, Annie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Second literacy plan.
Move to approve the secondary literacy plan as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Rachel. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Professional development plan.
Move to approve the FY23 professional development plan as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Annie. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Literacy program, K through 6 literacy program.
I move to approve the K-6 literacy plan as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Rachel. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 2022-2023 assessment plan.
Move to approve the 2022 to 2023 assessment plan as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Amber. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Establishing board committees.
I move to formally establish the board scholarship committee and the board legislative advocacy committee as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Rachel. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Terminating board committees.
I move to terminate.
Go ahead.
It's a lot. I move to terminate the following board committees: Advocacy Committee, African American Community Advisory Council, Board Development Committee, Calendar Review Committee, Community Engagement Committee, ECC Construction Committee, Fundraising Committee, MRH Foundation Committee, Middle School, High School Task Force, Teaching and Learning Committee, Safe and Inspirational Spaces Committee, and the Wellness Committee.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Rachel. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsections 1, 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.22 of the revised statutes of Missouri on July 21st, 2022, for the following specific reasons: personnel matters and legal matters.
Can I get a roll call?
I need a second first, though.
Oh, sorry.
Second,
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get a roll call?
Ms. Langston,
Yes.
Ms. Wibbycomb,
Yes.
Ms. Tasman Ewing,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Goldsman,
yes.
Ms. Herndon Miller.
Yes.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Oh, sorry, we already did it. We're ready to go into executive session. And the link, I believe, is in the board docs. Okay. All right. See everybody in just a minute.